to the November 10th, 2020 electronic meeting of the Energy Commission. This meeting is to affect social distancing and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are any technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during the public comment section, please call, and we're going to use the two numbers that we know work, 206-337-9723. I'll repeat that, 206-337-9723, or 213-338-8477. We're going to repeat that, 213-338-8477. This information is also available on the published agenda on Legistar and in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting via CTN channel 16 or AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. So, Josh, could you take the roll call?
Yes. Let's see. Commissioner Colvin Garcia.
Here.
Chair Mirsky.
Here.
Commissioner Gerber.
Here.
Commissioner Clevey.
Here.
Commissioner Schreiberg.
Here.
Commissioner Hookham.
I'm here.
Councilmember Hayner.
Here.
Commissioner Singleton. Commissioner Singleton.
He's here.
Yep. Okay.
He's just muted.
Just muted. Let's see. Commissioner Clevey. Did I already ask for Commissioner Clevey? Yes. Okay. We'll keep going. Commissioner Levin.
Here.
And then Commissioner George.
Here. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to turn my video on for this meeting. Meetings run really long in Detroit with work today. My apologies.
Do we have a quorum?
We have a quorum.
I think. And here's one more. Bridget.
Commissioner Bridget McCumber.
Okay. So first of all, hopefully everybody has had a chance to look at the agenda. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Can we get an approve and such a motion? Bridget moves. We have a second from Chuck. All in favor of the approving the motion as published, please say aye or indicate with a raised hand that you approve.
Aye.
Great. Anybody opposed? All in favor and none opposed, so the agenda is approved. So approval of the minutes. So I don't recall seeing the minutes. Did I miss them, or Josh?
Yeah. So John, this gets to the emails that we've been going back and forth on. I'm currently working with Thea to get everything updated on Legistar and have that all set up, including with CTN. So I'm hoping tomorrow we'll have everything up.
Okay, so we will have to approve the minutes then at our next meeting.
Hi, I don't know if anybody saw Ember's email, but she said she was stuck in the waiting room of Zoom and looking to be let in.
Yeah, I did see it. I'm not seeing, and I just emailed her back asking what name she's under. But I guess we can, the thing I can do is admit a few people and see.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now move on to public input or public comment. So this is an opportunity for persons to speak up for up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-337-9723 or 213-338-8477 and enter the meeting ID 968-2597-7397. So I'll repeat that, 968-2597-7397. And this is also on the meeting agenda, and city staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand, to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Josh, let us know if we have anyone in the queue.
I'm not seeing anyone right now, John.
Okay, I'll wait for another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll have an opportunity at the end of the meeting for additional public comment. So let's go ahead and move on. Josh, maybe interrupt yourself or me or others in the next agenda item if someone dials in just in a few seconds. The next point on the agenda is the energy report. By the way, the agenda is a rather skimpy one today, so hopefully the meeting will be short, and we'll have a number of other things that we can talk about that are going to be up on the agenda for the next meeting. But Josh, you want to start with energy news from the Office of Sustainability and Innovations?
Yes. So I have been working with Zach in our office to get our website updated. And we have, if you remember from last meeting, we took a whole bunch of updates from around the office, put it into a file. That file is also attached on the agenda. I'm not sure if, John, just because we don't have a lot going on in this meeting, whether we want to maybe go a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
On that piece of it. Okay. So let me share it with you all. Okay, I will start off by saying, John, we had a conversation about this beforehand, so I'll go ahead and introduce the topic. I think John, Carlene, and Bridget had a meeting, I believe it was about a week ago, maybe a little bit more now, a phone call talking just about some general kind of Energy Commission things, how the Energy Commission really interacts with OSI, the Office of Sustainability Innovations. And so I think that there's some interest to maybe rethink the way that that the office and the commission interact, specifically around the action tracker item. But Missy will be coming. She couldn't make it to this meeting, but she'll be coming to the December meeting to kind of address that further. With that said, I'll just go ahead and get started on some of the things that we've been working on within the office. So energy benchmarking and disclosure, Thea and Zach in the office have mostly been heading that. I know that we had a subcommittee that basically addressed specifically the I think buildings and built environment that talked about this. They have time set up now at this point. And I know Jan Culbertson, that was part of the subcommittee, as well as Wayne Appleyard are on that. So they're basically getting a whole bunch of stakeholders together in a room to think about and kind of talk more about, you know, what it means to have, and specifically this has to do with benchmarking. So what it means to have kind of transparency and information available as far as energy disclosure goes in the commercial sector and multifamily.
Before you leave that topic, Josh,
Yes.
I think it's important to share one of Missy's comments during the phone call that you referenced
Sure.
that we had a week ago about this topic. The commission knows that there's a draft ordinance for single-family residences that would require a home audit, energy audit and disclosure at the time of marketing. And Missy indicated that she had discussions and with a number of people that were politically well connected in the city, and the feeling was that rather than introduce individual ordinances for one sector at a time, that it would be much more likely to gain widespread support politically with council members as well as among residents and stakeholder groups if all of the energy benchmarking, disclosure, audit type of ordinances for all sectors, meaning single family, multifamily, commercial, and industrial, were introduced as a group. So there's been some banter back and forth, emails, discussions as to why that's been delayed. And so the call was made that we would finish all these and introduce them as one group as a proposal to council at the same time.
All right. Yep. So the next major item on our updates for the things OSI is working on, we have this renewable energy efficiency, electrification, and equity movement. So we're calling it Reform, RE4M. And this really came out of the electrification work that we were doing. So we had, and I think I might have brought this up in one of the earlier Energy Commission meetings, but we had a number of convenings with stakeholders, specifically contractors, other cities in the Great Lakes region that are all looking to kind of do something similar to go towards more electrification, really to just kind of start introducing the idea of electrification, try to figure out what the program would look like, and kind of collaborate with members of those convenings. And so we just wrapped those up not too long ago. It was probably a couple of weeks ago now. And we did some follow-up phone conversations. So we're really starting to think about how can we apply what we've learned with Reform, and specifically how do we kind of move forward with everything that we've learned from that side. There's an interest specifically to look at low-income areas. So Bryant Community Center has been something that's been pitched as an idea. Because the whole idea being that if we try to help those who are obviously most in need, those that have the hardest time to try to electrify, we can kind of create a template that works for everyone. So that's one thing that is currently ongoing.
Josh, could you talk a bit more about the renewable energy part of that REM4?
Yeah, of course.
REM?
Yeah, totally. So we took a look at a couple of different systems. So we looked at electrification. So specifically in terms of heat pumps, we looked at what would we do if we paired those heat pumps with solar panels, and then using those heat pump solar panels and then energy efficiency upgrades to the home. Could we basically bring down the cost? Because there's two different costs for electrification. There's the upfront cost of actually getting the system, which is generally more expensive than your traditional natural gas furnace, for example. And then there's the ongoing cost of natural gas versus electricity, as far as just the cost to power your heat pump versus if it was a furnace. So those are two challenges we've been looking at very seriously. And one of the things that, I think Fong and our part of our staff at OSI, she was thinking about, can we go ahead and partner these things together? She did some modeling and we looked at it. And it seems like it makes more financial sense if you're able to partner something like an electric heat pump with solar panels, because it just brings down the cost. I mean, basically you're generating some of that electricity through the solar panels, and you're not necessarily paying for that on the grid like you would be otherwise. So we've been doing some work around that as well. I mean, as of right now, it's all very preliminary. It's kind of just looking at everything that we gain from these convenings and trying to figure out if we can put together a model.
So is the electricity from the solar powering the heat pump?
That would be the idea. Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah. It'd be offsetting the.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other questions? Okay. We also have a Solarize. So we talked about this last time, the kind of Julie Solarize events that she's holding. There was also some consideration as to how we can kind of develop what is happening as far as Solarize goes. So whether we can include things like heat pumps within the bulk buys, battery storage systems in the bulk buys. And so that's something that we're looking at now.
Hey Josh, before you leave that, during the commission meeting and also in some correspondence and communication after the meeting.
Mhm.
There were requests and an indication that there might be cost information that would be shared. Is there any final decision on that, and when might that be?
Yeah. So the latest that I've heard, I think that they were looking at the potential for basically disclosing a price range. And then that kind of got to some of the questions that came out, I think, of the last convening, and that price range would have variables listed inside of it. So that way people knew roughly what that price range could be when they're looking at things and what the variables would be to actually, basically affect the bottom line. So something I worked a little bit with Julian, and I think that that's what they're going to go with.
Can we note in the meeting minutes that we would like a clear decision on that?
Sure.
And a date by which we would know when the decision will be provided. So if I don't necessarily want a date. I mean, it would be nice to be given a date right away, but at the very least, a date by when we'll get a date. If you understand what I mean.
Yes. Yep.
I
So,
think
Josh,
one.
go ahead.
Let me just finish real quick, and then I'll open it up. The other thing is there was also discussion about battery or storage options and whether or not that was really a, let's say, good return on the dollar invested from a climate perspective, from a greenhouse gas reduction perspective.
Yep.
I can.
Oh, I think John might have froze. Oh, wait a second here.
I think John just lost power at his house and his battery hasn't kicked on yet.
Yeah. It could be.
While we're waiting for John, I think there were other people stuck in the waiting room with me. And so maybe at least one of them, I think, wanted to give public comment. So whenever appropriate, it might be good to check back in with that.
Yeah, let me see. I think I actually see maybe someone with so no one's in the waiting room anymore. I put everyone inside just because we were having that issue. But let me see, maybe I do see a raised hand. Here we go. Caller 134, are you there?
Yes. Thanks,
Oh.
Mr. McDonald.
Hi, Ken.
Hi. I don't want to interrupt your report, so I could talk later whenever you think is appropriate.
Oh, no, if you wanna go ahead and jump in now, it's while we wait for John.
All right. Yeah, I'm apparently being placed in the waiting room makes it hard or impossible to see the star 9 indication. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Anyway, I'll make my 3-minute comment. Last month, I spoke to the commission about the fact that DTE Energy is the third dirtiest major utility in the country. DTE needs to clean up its act, but I know it can't simply replace coal and gas with renewables overnight. I'm not that naive. I know the transition will be extremely hard. It's simple physics. Consider energy density, defined as the amount of energy per fuel unit weight or volume. When humanity transitioned from biofuels to coal, and then from coal to crude oil, and then to natural gas, each time we stepped up from a lower to a higher density primary fuel source. That's why we did it, for more concentrated energy. Never before have we attempted to go from a higher energy density to a lower one. Why do wind and solar have such low energy density? Their capacity factor, which is actual versus maximum electricity output, is poor. Most wind turbines only work 20 to 25% of the time, and photovoltaics even less. In cloudier climates like ours, no more than 15%. So as renewables take over from fossil fuels, we need storage to fill in the gaps. That means lithium-ion batteries in the short term, maybe something like pumped hydro or compressed air for long-term storage. Commissioner Hookham is an expert on this. He's reviewed these technologies at previous meetings. Hydrogen generated using clean power electrolysis and stored in salt domes is another alternative. None of these is cheap. We always hear that wind and solar have become cheaper than fossil fuels for electricity generation. That's true in the narrow sense. The so-called levelized cost of energy is lower. That's the lifetime cost of generating electricity over the total electricity delivered. But the levelized cost doesn't take into account storage or land use. Large-scale renewables for full-time electricity generation are still not even nearly competitive in the marketplace. Here's my point. We can't wait for the market to solve the climate crisis. There's no time for that. We need mandates as part of a World War II scale or Marshall Project type mobilization. No one in government is talking in these terms, certainly not Joe Biden. Because we've avoided acting for so long and global heating is a delayed effect, we're now in an emergency requiring immediate and radical emission cuts to just avoid overshooting the Paris targets. 3 or 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which is where we're headed, at best, give us a world that, in my opinion, is not worth living in. Even stopping at 2 degrees, barely possible at this point, will bring a myriad of disasters that will make today's fires, droughts, floods, and hurricanes seem benign. Young people feel robbed of their future, and they're right. My generation squandered the gift of time and destroyed that future for them. To salvage anything, we must start the conversion right now, this minute, both at the personal level and at the policy level. As for policy, let's take some risks at the local level. Invoke home rule, modify our building code to mandate that new construction and major renovations be all electric, form a solar power cooperative to build new clean electricity generation and storage, and establish a municipal electric utility. State law permits all of these. Nationally, we must reorient our entire economic system towards reducing emissions. And since the wealthy are by far the highest emitters, the top 10% in personal wealth are responsible for half of all emissions, that means drastically reducing economic inequality. This will not happen voluntarily, or probably at all, given the entrenched nature of consumer society and growth capitalism. So I can only dread our climate future. I won't be around terribly much longer, but to the young people serving on this commission and those on the call tonight, I can only say, I'm sorry, I failed you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Josh, I'd just like to make a quick comment on our speaker. Thank him very much for his input and coming forward. So I agree with most of it. I encourage him to take a serious look at the experience of Boulder, Colorado, trying to become a municipal utility, what that required and what happened, and encourage more people to get into energy law, graduate from the University of Michigan with law, and go to work for on the public sector side, helping us to win that battle, because Boulder spent over $80 million and they lost. And Ann Arbor's looking at that, and several people looked at that price tag and said, well, we don't have $80 million to fight over this, and especially if we lose. So, we have to be even more creative in some of our thinking on this. And the other piece is that part of this equation, which we're not looking at, is carbon removal and adaptation. What we can do to adapt. I know it's controversial. I didn't think it was, but controversial to paint our roofs white in Ann Arbor. Oddly enough, some people don't go along with that idea. But I think there are things that we could do at the local level for carbon removal. Communities are doing this. There are technologies that are available, and having Ann Arbor's economic development people kind of engage on what are the emerging businesses in carbon removal, what do they look like, and why aren't they coming to Ann Arbor to launch their businesses or do those? So, I think aligning ourselves across, broadening what we think about as energy, and looking for opportunities to grow businesses here that are world leaders in carbon removal technology is something that the economic development arm of the city could be doing. My sense is that perhaps John and Steve might want to educate the economic development side of the house about those kinds of things, because my sense is that they're not on board with sustainability like the rest of us are. And we might see more opportunities there to remove carbon and buy ourselves some time in those industries than trying to figure out how to get TE to put in more solar. So just a comment.
A comment to your comment, Mark, briefly.
Sure.
There is a entity within the Energy Institute of the University of Michigan called the Global CO2 Initiative. They are looking at various CO2 sequestration options, as well as use then for those industrial uses of that CO2. I had a couple of Zoom meetings with them, and put Jan Culbertson in touch with them. Jan's head of the 2030 district, which is involving the commercial and industrial side of the city, and she's also an architect. So one of the opportunities is the use of CO2 sequestering concrete. Obviously, we're not doing a tremendous amount of building in the city. If anyone is, it's the university, and hopefully that's one of the things we can put pressure on the university to do, is when they do build, to use their concrete favored by their own institute. But that's one option. And of course, there's other carbon sequestering building materials too. So as building codes change and practices change, hopefully we can make some progress along those lines.
Yes, I think that's it. You have those guys perhaps come speak to us, give a presentation on what they're doing. Would that be worth doing?
Josh, can you note that in the items for the next agenda? Yeah, we could do that. I know the head.
I'd really like that. Personally speaking, as someone that works for a union that does a lot of construction work, that is a big issue for us. We are, big proponents of moving to a green economy and infrastructure as fast as possible. But as I'm sure everyone's aware, that concrete emits a lot of CO2 emissions. So if there is an optional alternative, I would love to hear about it and learn more.
Great, we can do that.
And I know, John, I think Susan Fancy used to do a lot of work in this.
Susan works for that, correct. Susan works for that particular initiative, yes.
So it might be worth reaching out. Okay.
I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable again. So if I drop out, just carry on without.
I want to just really quickly make sure, was there anyone else, just because of the technical difficulties of the lobby and not being able to star in from the lobby, is there anyone else who wanted to comment during public comment that wasn't able to? You can hit *9 if you're on your phone. Okay. If you do, just go ahead and we can stop and give you a chance to talk. So other programs that we're working on, electrification of vehicles. So currently working with the DDA to get more vehicles, specifically electric vehicle chargers. So they're looking at about 100 plus level 2 chargers. I think the next steps on that front, and this is mostly work being done by CIMI in coordination with the DDA. But they're looking at some of the cost analysis and some of the different types of structures that are necessary to advance that side of things.
Josh, do you know the current count? It's in the 20s, isn't it? Or right around 20?
Yeah, I don't have it off the top of my head because I'm trying to think. I know parking structures have quite a few, the downtown library one. So I'm trying to think if we include the parking structure, we don't. But yeah, we'll go with 20. I mean, that sounds ballpark.
Josh, while we're on the topic of EVs, I sent an email earlier. I'd heard a rumor that the city was looking at buying Teslas.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a true rumor?
It's true.
It is, yeah, it is a potentially true rumor.
It's on the agenda for this next meeting Monday.
Yeah.
Mhm. I know part of our sustainability goals have to do with sustainable labor. And full disclosure, I actually own Tesla stock, but they're a company that doesn't use union labor. Is that an issue that has been discussed as part of that decision?
I don't think it has. I think the conversation, and it's kind of peripheral conversation. I kind of sit on the outside of this, but from what I've heard, they were looking at specifically police cars and cars that would be able to fit some of the equipment and policemen and everything. And I guess the Tesla was the one that was chosen as being fast and meeting some of these different criteria. I don't think that the labor component of it is known, or at least has been looked at, but it's something I can definitely pass along.
I just wanted to briefly comment on that, and I appreciate, Bridget, you bringing this up. I know that I've had conversations with a couple council members about issues around this, that this might get pulled to the agenda. I know that the Huron Valley Area Labor Council is going to come out with a statement tonight against the city's purchase of it. And especially considering that there's an American union-made alternative with the Ford Mach-E, that is comparable in price range. Obviously, I don't know the details on performance and so forth that would meet the city's specifications there, but from what I'm aware of, there is a resourcefully and properly sourced alternative electric vehicle on that. So, but I just wanted to make that correct note.
Josh, I have a question too.
Yeah.
Well, is it part of I didn't look at the plan, so does the Tesla include a power wall, solar power wall to each power those cars with a power wall, or are we just buying Teslas and power them with coal and frack gas?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a power wall that's included. Did you have
So using an American alternative then would be smart. I mean, if they bring a solar system with them, that's one thing. But if it's just one electric vehicle versus another,
So our council questions are due on tomorrow at noon, and so I was just getting ready to send them off, and so I was waiting until after this meeting because several of the things that are on our agenda are pertinent to our work here, including the Chapter 55 changes for solar height, which is something I just want to get 2 minutes somewhere during this meeting about. But yeah, they say Teslas, and then they say we're in for a couple of Tesla charging systems also, 5,000 each. And so I have all kinds of questions around this item. I don't know who some of the other folks have been talking to on council about it, but I can't believe that there's not an alternative. And so I know that the contract required I have all kinds of questions. One of them is, are we getting in a situation with the OSI budget where they're going to be subsidizing these fleet purchases? And that's a new thing for us. Right. And so that's one consideration. And then the other is just how was it that Tesla rose to the top of this choice when we've been we've had the Bolts, and then of course there's Volts, and then the Ford products that were mentioned. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not exactly sure it says in the resolution who these vehicles are for, but it doesn't really say why Tesla is an outstanding choice other than it meets certain basic requirements. And we're also, by the way, simultaneously replacing many of the police cruisers with the new Ford hybrids, which are supposed to be amazing because they have a big battery tray in them that runs all the gear. And so most police car time is idle time, and they don't idle time anymore. They run the battery down, then they idle to charge the battery. Right. So these new Ford hybrids are pretty awesome, in my opinion, after reading through the descriptions of them just now. So I don't know. I as soon as I saw it, I thought that's really like a bad look, like $1 billion for climate change, and then we start buying Teslas. It just doesn't ring, even though the price is very comparable. I mean, the Tesla they're used, there's 36,000, and they look at these Ford hybrids and they're about the same. Mm-hmm. So it's competitive on a price consideration, but the union consideration jumped right out to me because I know a lot of folks who are really down on Tesla for their labor practices, and and also the sourcing, frankly. And this is obviously we talked about this many times. All the concerns around the sourcing of these rare metals, for these batteries. So whatever. I don't know. Yeah, we're gonna talk about buying Teslas next Monday.
And
Well,
I'll
batteries
I
are
saw
one
your
thing.
letter. Thank you for writing that. I just saw it blip in during my earlier meeting. So thanks for pointing that out, Bridget.
So Jeff, I hope that in the analysis they're doing apples, not apples and oranges on emissions, because if we're charging Tesla's batteries with coal and frack gas, that makes no sense at all. So and, I don't know how we're comparing Volt versus Tesla versus the Ford stuff, but it seems that the emissions stuff, looking at local emissions is just part of it. Looking at the fugitive emissions that are coming in, we're not accounting for DTE's emissions to send us the power to charge these cars. Then all we're doing is transferring the emissions from Ann Arbor to someplace else.
Yeah, I don't see the breakdown, but I could certainly ask for that.
Yeah, it should be be able to do it in our emissions study and the stuff that we do on the Ann Arbor's plan for our emissions, greenhouse gas emissions stuff. But my understanding is that we don't capture the emissions that DTE generates to generate the power they send to us. We only capture it at the end use. So if we're charging batteries and running police cars, with batteries in Ann Arbor and powering those batteries, charging them with frack gas and coal, I'm not sure how we're subsidizing DTE. It seems a little nuts to me. Why don't we just spend money and put more insulation in our buildings instead?
So it seems to me this is kind of the same conversation that John was having before he, froze up. That's the economics of batteries. When you use solar power to charge a battery and then use a battery to charge a car, you're really introducing significant losses in that whole process. And even though it may be feeding DTE, there is a benefit to knocking off daytime energy, even if it's only moving it to the evening. They still net lose because you're taking the most valuable solar power and offsetting the most expensive generation from DTE. So they don't win from that. And I also think it's important when you think about the economics of this, that solar is the only way to go. If you're charging from DTE, you're paying perhaps twice or three times as much. The cost of energy for solar power today is probably 1/3 of what it is if you're buying from DTE. And there's even a special rate, I believe, that would apply for charging an EV fleet that compensates you quite significantly for export during the day. So it really could make quite a bit of economic sense just to skip the extra battery, charge the EVs when you can, even during the day, or sell your current to DTE during the day, which basically offsets other generation, including the gas that you're talking about with the wellhead emissions. It offsets that, even though you are buying back electricity in the evening at a much, much lower price. So I think this whole area should just be investigated better, including the alternative. But if the idea is just to get an electric car and not charge from solar, I'd say that's not a good idea. You're probably going to have a garage, and that garage could have lots of solar on it. You'll probably have other areas where the buses are charged, where you can have lots and lots of solar there as well.
I will say one of the things that I looked at early on, there's a site, South Industrial, and it's where the Housing Commission is, and there's a lot of land there. We were actually looking at potentially using kind of a whole all-in-one, so basically a solar carport charger with battery system to basically charge all of the electric vehicles for the fleet. Specifically, I think this was for Public Works at the time. And then the other place that makes a lot of sense is Wheeler. Because Wheeler is where Fleet is. And so we have, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wheeler as a building, but it's kind of a barn looking building. And out in front, there is rather large parking lots. And so we were thinking if we go ahead and do overhangs, like basically, protected parking lots that are really just to kind of double as solar panels, and then have batteries in that and have that charge. So there are a couple of sites that we've looked at the potential for specifically building in, the whole system, an all-in-one battery charger with a solar system that actually charges the car directly. I don't think, by the way, these in particular don't have that feature, but I know it's something we've looked at in the past.
But I say that just to summarize my point of view, if you're going to electrify the police cars and other buses around the city, that you need to do it with solar power. You don't want to do it by just relying on buying energy from DTE. That would be the wrong thing to do, as for what Mark is saying. Very wrong.
Well, and also, Jeff, I think, that this is a cart and a horse thing. I mean, I think the way to look at this is how do we have us take our solar asset and use it most effectively? So when we're starting to look at cars and stuff, having that help drive the decision what kinds of cars, as opposed to, oh, we bought electric cars, now we got to figure out how to charge them. That's to me, that's we got a cart and a horse problem here. So we've been talking about Wheeler for a long time. The decision on Wheeler, let's maximize the solar, that should be a main driver on now what do we do with vehicles for the city. And if we're buying vehicles that we're not charging at the Wheeler station, then why not? And how would we justify doing that? So, we're killing two birds with one stone, but let's, if we're going to make a decision about Teslas, I mean, for me, the question is, how is Tesla going to be charged at the Wheeler Center? And is that a better deal than a Ford or something else? And then all those other questions about labor and everything come through. But ultimately, this is about emissions. So how can we put people to work and not generate emissions? How can we have gender equality and racial equality in a renewable energy society that's tied to sustainability? All those things have to be tied together. If we make these incremental, isolated decisions about what cars we're going to buy, we're going to find ourselves stuck. And I can tell you, we're going to be stuck. We're going to be stuck charging our stuff. We're going to have an electric ordinance where want to make the whole city electric. DTE couldn't be more happy. Oh boy, we get to sell more gas and coal. They're asking for a second 1,000 megawatt natural frac gas plant right now in Lansing with the Public Service Commission. A second one. And they're capping solar at 1%. So as soon as they get 1% of the amount of solar that they need, they will not let anybody else hook up. Or if they do, they'll charge you at a rate even below the current rate that they're talking about now. We need a go-it-alone strategy here, like the caller called in. And part of that is we got to be smart about this. We own Wheeler. We can put solar on Wheeler. We can do this tomorrow. If we can't afford it, let's get a third-party financer up here to do it for us. And let's pack it in and get it done.
Well, and there's even some locations. Oh, Jeff, did you have something you wanted to say?
About the electrification. So when we talked about the DDA operations, and they're talking about 100 L2 chargers and these parking structures. Well, I hope that the solar panels are going up on the top floor of these parking structures for these L2 chargers, and you can park for free there and charge for free or whatever. You got to park on top right underneath the solar panel, or we got to run the wiring down through the structure or whatever, however they determine their, needs analysis or demand analysis for their parking of these EVs. But there's no way we should be hooking 100 L2 chargers up to the grid full time. Like if people are parking their cars for their downtown offices or whatever, that's during the day, the solar should be going right into those car batteries.
So I have a few comments, if I may. I would hope that council, as well as OSI, looks at this carefully and lays out its rationale. First of all, we should also not let perfect become the enemy of the good. The Union of Concerned Scientists regularly updates how clean electric vehicles are when they're powered from the grid. And in 2018, an electric vehicle in Michigan was the equivalent of a 49 mile per gallon internal combustion engine. That is dramatically better than equivalent internal combustion engines. So this is something that we need to consider. The grid is getting cleaner, and it could be that Ann Arbor will at some point in time in the future, as well as the DDA, be able to access renewable energy, whether it's solar or wind or whatever. I don't think it really matters, whether it comes from DTE or whether it comes from the landfill or whether it comes from something on top of Wheeler. So I would hope that OSI lays that out. I haven't seen, I looked about 3 or 4 months ago as to whether the Union of Concerned Scientists had updated their figure, and I assume it also takes into account, those guys are smart enough to look at fugitive emissions from methane. If they didn't, that would be really concerning. I assume that they're smart enough. The second thing, as far as Teslas are concerned, one of the things that I would hope OSI would also present as an argument to council is what is the likelihood of other vehicles coming on the market in the foreseeable future. And if there is not another market, another vehicle, again, we should think about the various trade-offs that we have with all these other things like labor and so on and so forth. And it would be, in my view, irresponsible to wait until 2025 if we can do something next year, if there's not an equivalent vehicle coming on the market. If there is one coming on the market and it's coming on the market next year, then that would be a good reason to wait for a year and buy another vehicle that uses labor that adheres to the standards that the city has set. So there's a number of different things that we need to consider here. And I would recommend that we not beat this topic to death. I think Jeff and others are raising questions that the city, that OSI needs to be able to provide to council in order to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And the Energy Commission can help with that too.
Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, Jeff, to your point, so we had looked a long time ago at doing solar panels on a parking structure, and there was concerns about a sail effect. So when winds kind of pick up, and if you have the wrong angle, solar panels can get ripped off the roof. There was an analysis done that basically showed that the winds could gust up, strong enough to actually pose a risk. So we were looking at other ways to do that. But on the other hand, there are places like water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, where they have really low rates as far as the cost of electricity. And at locations like that, for example, you might get better bang for the buck if you're doing solar panels. They're, charging electric vehicles directly, since a lot of times you'll be able to make up that cost a lot quicker. So I do think, again, to John's point, some of this has to be looked at in more detail. And just figuring out where it makes more sense to use what type of application. And, again, in full transparency, I wasn't very involved with the Tesla decision in particular, because it's, I worked on some of this stuff a couple of years ago, but nothing's too recent. So I can definitely take that back as a question to OSI.
When you speak to Wheeler and like the water treatment, wastewater treatment and so on, I talked to Dr. Stultz about that because I wanted to prioritize critical infrastructure buildings for the city as part of our resilience also, not just the sustainability. So hopefully we can keep that prioritization in focus as we look for places to harvest, solar energy.
Yeah, I mean, my number one location every time there's any type of improvement is generally those three. And in part, it comes from a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint as well. So they just, those water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant are the largest producers of greenhouse gas emissions for the city, and then followed by Wheeler and City Hall. City Hall's, yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, just like, I just got out of a CARD meeting and we're talking about Gelman and the dioxin and all that and water treatment. And, if we end up having a UV because we can't keep the dioxin out of our water intakes in the Huron River, we are doomed from an energy perspective, because that UV energy drain is insane. And wastewater treatment's going through there right now with the cryptosporidium. They put in a small Trojan system, and I'm sure their energy bill just shot right up. Yeah. So yeah, it's really critical.
That's where kind of analyzing the different situations, what makes most sense, how can we incorporate solar, where maybe, you hook up the solar specifically to the UV operations, thinking outside the box a little bit. I think a lot of times we can, if we look a little deeper, we can figure out what makes most sense for each site. That's a great point.
Josh, can we move on?
Yes, let's move on. So bikes, this is kind of a discount program that Simi has been working on as well, mostly through e-bikes. So using all these different electric bikes, and there's, as it says in this kind of summary, they do discounts for these electric bikes, so you can go and get a discount. I think Simi's just basically been adding more and more types of bikes to the discount list, which is really nice. And electric bikes they have that the possibility of going electric if you need to go a further distance, or you can just use it. Some of these bikes you can actually just use it as a conventional bike, so it's really nice because it allows you to go a much further range than a traditional bike would, and with a discount. Green rental housing. So this kind of falls into some of the disclosure work that we've been doing, and I think there's just a lot of stakeholder engagement work that's been underfoot currently. It kind of wraps up really closely with specifically energy disclosure and ensuring that we're incentivizing certain types of buildings as far as, envelopes and other things of that nature. Okay, other things going on, 10,000 Tree Initiative. This is another one that I haven't been very involved with. I know that we're looking for someone to actually coordinate and manage this, the 10,000 Tree Initiative. So basically, as it says, we're trying to plant 10,000 trees, offset, kind of getting into a more natural form of sequestration, as we were talking about earlier.
Hey, Josh, on that
yes.
that front, we should use our green spaces. We've got all these green spaces around the city that we don't use at all. They're just land that's not used.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of opportunity there for sustainable food, for trees, for landfill, or not landfill, but wastewater sludge use. Nobody's doing anything with it. Where's the holistic plan? And I would continue to harp about that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We had great success with the food forest up at Arrowwood Leslie Park, and we've had 2 work sessions, and it's almost all in. It's amazing, and they have an extended plan to run, to get fruit and nut trees all the way down the side of there along the Leslie Park golf course fence. And so, I think that hopefully we're in a year, and then next year into that project, that it'll act as a teaching site for that and say, look what we're doing here, and it doesn't take that much to stick some trees in there if you have people committed to maintaining them.
Yeah, no, I think that's and I think if you're able to kind of like you guys are talking about, if you're able to combine, 2 different things together. So for example, fruit trees in certain areas or whatever, where you're able to kind of, I think that's a great use of land. So that's.
Just to keep this in perspective, I read the University of Michigan's Presidential Commission on Carbon Neutrality report related to biosequestration. 2 interesting facts. Wetlands are actually here in the Midwest the best ecosystem for sequestering carbon. And actually some entities are converting ag land into wetlands as a biosequestration methodology. A second interesting fact, all of the trees on the university's property here in Ann Arbor, 18,000 trees, the total amount of carbon that they sequester is the equivalent of 150 cars traveling for 1 year, only 150 cars. And that's every tree on all of the university's property here in Ann Arbor. So when we're talking about sequestration, at least during using natural means, at least trees, this is not something that is going to solve our CO2 problems. It's something we want to do because it has a lot of other ecosystem benefits as well as human health benefits, but we shouldn't fool ourselves that by doing this, we're going to be making a great contribution to reducing our greenhouse gas inventory.
Well, and this is where that presentation that we were talking about earlier, as far as sequestration, might be really informative to let us know what, how those cycles work. And I was really, I saw a presentation actually from Susan Fancy, probably more than 2 years ago now, and was really blown away by some of the work that they're doing over there. Mark, did you have something?
John, to be fair, those trees are existing trees. I think we're talking about new trees, which will, sequester carbon throughout the.
It is, but the total carbon that's estimated to have been sequestered in existing trees on U of M is emitted by 150 cars in 1 year.
Oh, so it's not just how much they do in a year, the total for the life cycle.
Yep, for the total amount that they have currently sequestered is the equivalent output of 150 cars in 1 year.
Wow.
I was surprised. And that's a study that the University of Michigan did.
You were surprised it was so low?
That I've surprised.
Yeah, I've been harping on about natural capital for a while, but then, you know, other folks I know in the, you know, on the environmental fringes have said, you got to watch it with that, because then, you know, however they're putting the numbers on, sometimes it comes out low and you realize, hey, that land's cheap. I'd rather put a high rise there or whatever. And
Right.
or a grocery store. And so the natural capital value isn't always calculated in a way. And sometimes it's dangerous to put a figure on something and let it have more of an intrinsic natural value.
Right. Interesting.
I don't know. It really shines when it comes to stormwater, though.
Hmm.
So
Sorry, I dropped out for a second again. I didn't hear all of that. So just keep on going.
For the next one, Aging in Place Efficiently program. So the City of Ann Arbor actually got a grant for this. And I think at this point, we're just looking for people to help run it. So it's kind of in the design phase, and we're looking to hire 2 part-time funded coordinators, basically. Other things going on, A20 ambassadors. So we had that meeting, I think it was last month now, where we went over, you know, some of the material for the ambassadors that we'll be bringing on. There is, and I think when talking to Missy a little bit about the conversation, John, that you had with her along with Bridget and Carlene, you know, she had suggested in this example for to share a questionnaire that had come out from this with the Energy Commission. So I think she was thinking about something a bit more informal as far as, you know, us bringing, or OSI bringing different tasks to the commission and then having the commission kind of respond to it. So I'll be sharing a questionnaire that goes along with the A20 ambassadors program with the commission. So that way everyone can take a look. I think, you know, if you guys can respond within 2 weeks, I'll put it into the email.
That's not the application, is it? Form? It's a different form, isn't it?
I think I would have to look at it a little closer.
The applications, I mean, it's like a job application. They want your
Yeah, no, I think this is actually a question.
references.
Yeah. I think this is actually a questionnaire, but I'll send it over to you guys.
Okay.
And that way you'll have it, because this is one of those projects where I'm peripherally involved, but I haven't really been deeply involved in the creation of it. And then finally, public engagement updates. So climate coffee conversation happening on November 12th at 8 a.m. There's a Zoom link here if anyone would like to join us. There'll be a couple of us. We're probably going to rotate in and out of these. So every month there'll be someone different who's coming to the, and it's kind of just like a coffee hour. People have questions, so we can answer their questions.
By the way, that's going to be a monthly.
Monthly. Yep. Thanks, John. That's right. Monthly. There's also a transportation power hour, November 12th. So if anyone is interested in this, Simi has been having a hard time getting people to sign up for this. So please spread the word, let people know about it. I'm sure he'd love to have a decent turnout as far as attendance goes. So that's another thing Simi's working on. Yeah. And I think we pretty much worked our way through all the major topics. Were there any things that commissioners had as far as events that maybe we should put on here or other commissioners should know about?
I sent out a notification. There are 2 webinars that might be of interest. One is tomorrow from 1 to 2, financing options to deliver carbon neutrality. There's going to be several large entities talking about in particular related to the university, but potentially also related to larger customers like the city or industrial entities, how they can finance their carbon neutrality plans. And then on the 19th, I think it is, it's a webinar called Towards a Just and Equitable Carbon Neutrality Plan. Both of these are being put on by an organization I'm affiliated with called Voices for Carbon Neutrality, whose mission is to accelerate and to catalyze carbon neutrality at the University of Michigan. I sent an email out just before 6 o'clock.
I'm going to be on that second panel too. on
Okay,
the
we're good.
19th. But yeah, it should be good.
Josh, the GLREA annual meeting is going to be Saturday, December 5th. Dan Scripps, the chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission, is going to be the speaker, and Jagger Shaw is coming in, and he's going to be the keynote speaker, and it's all Zoom-based this year.
Okay.
So you can sign up at GLREA's website, but that's going to be happening on the 5th.
Wonderful.
I'm excited about Jigger being on. I listened to his weekly podcast along with 2 others, and it's really great.
Me too. He owes me money because I invested in sun energy. It went up to $35 a share and dropped the junk bonds in about 2 weeks. I mean, holy crap.
That was after he left, I think.
Yeah, it was after he left. And that's his answer too. Well, I wasn't there. Yeah.
Hey, Josh, one last thing. The link to this report in Legistar did not work for me. It was broken.
Okay. Let me, yeah, sometimes if you don't finalize the copy, there's some funky things that go on. Let me look into that. I can get it live for you. In fact, if you guys want, I can just send it.
Yeah, would you just send it out as an
let me
attachment
just
to
send
the
it
email?
all to you right
Thank
now.
you.
So that way you all.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right, and I think that pretty much does it as far as news, notes, and updates then. Here we go.
Did we have any updates from council members, from Councilman Hayner, or from any of the other commissioners?
I could just say something briefly about a few energy-related things that are on the next council meeting. C1 is changes to Chapter 55, the rooftop solar energy systems. I saw height waiver, and currently it's written that it changes. They allow up to 12 feet above. Says, sorry, rooftop solar energy systems may extend up to 12 feet above the surface of a flat roof when determining the height of the building. And so I'm going to assume that they mean the height of the building caps at whatever it is, and how they, they have a fence around the AC air handlers and all that. And this can be 12 above the surface of a flat roof. So hopefully planning's, or, our building and development is fine with that language. My question was, what about folks who have, pitched roofs, which also have rooftop solar applications on them? If somebody's right at that 31 feet or whatever, and then they start putting panels on there, they're going to be 31.6 or 31.8 or whatever it is. So I just put that in my council questions. I didn't know if anybody had any insight into that. But right now we only discussed the rooftop solar as part of a flat roof. And the other part of the changes are to solar energy systems, and really not requiring people to come back and do a complete site plan resubmission and so on for a solar energy system. That we waive we describe some things it can't do. It can't increase impervious surface. You can't remove landmark trees, and you can't remove required parking and things like that. But it was being stymied by the area, the surface area that was allowed. And so I think these are good changes. I'm just not sure if for the height variance we should also include pitched roofs. So just wanted to share that. That's the biggest thing, plus the Teslas.
Hey Jeff, if you need energy commission assistance, don't hesitate to ask us. That's what our mission is. We're supposed to support you guys. I don't think we've ever faced a question lately from council on these kinds of topics. Don't hesitate to call.
Well, thanks. I'm not sure I'm going to be on Energy Commission next 2 years. We put in for different things, and we're still sorting it all out, who ends up where. And I didn't get some of the ones I asked for, and I was given some I didn't, and Energy Commission wasn't part of that mix, unfortunately. So I'm not sure, because I actually enjoy it, and I know I missed a couple, but it's tough because sometimes it falls right when our Gelman stuff is happening. But I've really enjoyed being on here and learning all the things that are, I know it's going to be critical, and I feel like I kind of, maybe the next 2 years would be the better 2 years now that our E20 plan's starting to roll and all this stuff's happening. I feel like I could contribute maybe more in the next couple of years. So we're going to see how it all shakes out next Monday. I don't know if they're fixed until we vote on them or what. It looks like the process is being run differently this year than than it was 2 years ago. So if I don't see it next year, thanks for
Well,
what you're doing.
Jeff, I just would like to make sure though that you understand what Chuck is offering as in terms of like really what our role is. Regardless, we hope that you're able to continue being part of the Energy Commission, and if you're not, to please convey the message that this is what we're here for, to offer, information, advice. I mean, the members of the commission are like extremely experienced and knowledgeable, and that's what we're here for exactly these types of questions.
Well, yeah, thanks for saying that. It looked like the memo that preceded this resolution and these changes, it made it sound like it had gone through our subcommittees and everything, and we'd taken a look at that, but maybe that's not accurate.
This did not go through the Energy Commission. I think it went through planning. And
Yes.
I don't know if the restrictions apply to residential zoned areas or only commercially zoned areas, or I mean, I don't know the details, but just to reiterate Chuck's and Carlene's point, we would be potentially a second point that you could go to, not only to staff, but come to Energy Commission for clarification of any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I'm reading through it again in the full body text here, and they were treating it just like it had to do with height, area, and placement under UDC, and not really so interested in, but they talk about anticipation. It says, under current code, this proposal would trigger a full site plan review for the site, making installations of solar structure possible but cost prohibitive, which it would be. Staff anticipates other possible sites in the city have similar considerations that make ground mount difficult to install, right? I mean, maybe, I don't know what the hurry is on this. Maybe we'll have a conversation at council and I'll say, look, can we ask Energy Commission to take a look at this? I don't know what changes would be made. This has really been designed to loosen it up and allow more solar installations. So that's the important thing to me. But I urge people to take a look at it and send me comments between now and the 16th, if that's helps. It's on there as C1. I can share it with anybody who needs it. Feel free to ask, or I can share it with all Energy Commission if you want to see it.
Thank you. Larry, that might be something you might be able to help on, or also Chuck as well, possibly Teresa, I don't know.
I'd like to see it. I'm not aware of what the issue would be, so yeah, I'd like to read it.
Yeah, I'll share it to you. I'll share a link to it in Legistar right now. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for your service on the commission. So I guess we can go to updates from the various working groups, and also from me for the Environmental Commission. Josh, you want to lead us through that?
Yeah, sure. So we had a really good meeting on renewables, in particular looking at a whole bunch of projects that I'm working on. And this kind of gets back to the conversation we were having earlier, Jeff, about, just different sites, trying to figure out what makes sense for those sites as far as solar, battery, et cetera. I think that there was a conversation that came out of it specifically towards batteries. And I think that might, Chuck, if you or Larry or someone else who deals with batteries, I think it might be worthwhile going through, even for the whole commission, to really understand the use case for batteries, applications, things of that nature. Because I think it came out that the batteries aren't always, I think it's almost like a go-to, and it really does have a specific application. So that's something that came out of it. Yeah, and just a whole bunch of kind of follow-ups. So just every time that we have a different type of application that we're doing, or something that I'm working on, I'm going to be tapping into the renewables subcommittee for help. Specifically, one of the things, Chuck, and I know you weren't able to be there for this one, but one of the things that came out of it was talking about the water treatment plant, looking at batteries for peak shaving at the water treatment plant. So trying to see if that
Yeah, I do energy storage value analysis
Awesome.
almost daily. So yeah, I'd be happy to help.
It'd be super helpful. Yeah, so I think that's the major updates from renewables, unless anyone has anything else they want to add. Okay, building and built environment. We kind of already went over this, but there was, again, Thea and Zach, who are OSI staff, are working on energy disclosure specifically for commercial and multifamily. They put together I guess a set, I think there's 4 meetings that they've already put together, and basically they're stakeholder meetings. So they're going to be including, and I can't remember what the total number is at this point, but probably 10 to 15 people in those roughly, trying to get feedback. And I think Wayne Appleyard, the previous chair for the commission, for the Energy Commission, as well as Jen Culbertson, who is the chair of the 23 district, will both be attending those. Were there any questions on that one?
Josh, maybe input for Missy's presentation in a month, and that is what role, if any, would the Energy Commission have with regards to developing a proposal for concierge services,
Yes.
which is a service that would basically service primarily the buildings in the built environment, although it could also get into other areas, potentially like transportation and things like that, but mostly it's intended for the built environment.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It's one of those things where I think, at least I have seen it as the foundation to a lot of work that we're doing. I think if you're reaching out to someone and you have a contact, you're able to give them information as far as this unbiased source they can go to. It really helps to tie in a lot of the work that we're doing. And I find a lot of importance in moving that forward. So I'll make sure to pass on the message.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's see, other things going on, community outreach. So we talked a little bit about this, the A2 Zero Ambassador program. I will be sending out that file for the Energy Commission's review. I could pass it out only to the community outreach subcommittee, but maybe the whole commission. I don't know, John, if you or anyone else has a preference.
I would send it to everybody for their information.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely do that.
So my understanding is that at least one commissioner has signed up. From what I understand, more people have signed up for the program than there are slots currently planned. At least that's my understanding. And so the intent is that it will be offered hopefully multiple times going forward. Is that your understanding as well, John?
Yes. Yeah, my understanding is that there's going to be, like you're saying, kind of multiple classes of ambassadors, or so it's going to be kind of a rolling thing. Okay, great. So next one, transportation electrification. Carlene, John, anyone else on the transportation side want to give an update?
I have one update, and that is about the schedule for the EV readiness ordinance. We had been informed, and our objective was to make sure that the changes to the ordinance were complete in order for it to be included in the November 16th City Council agenda for its first reading. And we just were informed late last week on Friday that it did not make it. Apparently, the legal department did not complete its review of the ordinance. So we're told that the next meeting for the first reading would be December 7th. But we don't know exactly if that's going to be 100% certain. So, but that's all I can tell you at this point.
And by the way, beyond that, Carlene, you want to just talk about our work with Cindy and working on the strategy paper and an overall strategy, just real briefly?
There is a list of actions that can possibly be undertaken by the city in its transportation electrification initiative. And right now, the Transportation Electrification Committee is looking at this list. We're looking at how to categorize it and prioritize it at this point in time. And we've been working with Simi on this for the past couple months, and we're continuing to do so. So yeah, that's what we're currently looking at right now. And we're just considering this list right now.
Our last meeting was canceled because of the election, so we're meeting again in another week.
Well, we have a pretty aggressive schedule, actually. I mean, we have a every other week schedule.
Yep.
And so that was also recently established. And since because of the election this last week, we skipped it, and we're going to be meeting again next week. Thanks.
And then John, the Environmental Commission.
Yeah, Environmental Commission, very briefly, in our last meeting, we voted to update our bylaws. We had a presentation of the Ann Arbor greenhouse gas inventory. Had been previously presented to the Energy Commission. Mark, I think it was you raised the question about fugitive methane emissions. And Josh, hopefully you can answer this. I requested it in an email, but I don't recall seeing an answer. My recollection is that Thea mentioned, at least to the Environmental Commission, that there's an estimate of the impact of fugitive emissions in our greenhouse gas inventory.
Yes, that's correct, John. Yep. So, yeah, I don't know how far we want to go down this rabbit hole, but there's definitely an estimate.
Yeah. And obviously those estimates of what the impacts are range significantly, and because methane is so potent, it can make a really big difference, but they are indeed included in our inventory. And, you know, as time goes on, I'm sure, and as those estimates become more accurate, then we'll better be able to reflect that impact. And again, I can't speak to it, Thea can. Maybe that's something we talk to her about in the future. I don't know if it's through the entire supply chain. I don't know if it's just emissions within city boundaries, but there is an element in the inventory that considers fugitive emissions.
So the fugitive emissions that are included are natural gas. So if you have a natural gas plant, for example, there's estimates as far as leakage on that side. And then there's some very rough estimates as far as every so much as far as units of usage for CCF, how much is, you know, the chances of how much are actually being off-gassed. So there are some very rough estimates. The problem is that there's, like John was saying, a wide range as far as what those estimates really are, and what so the University of Michigan, for example, they have you know, students who are working on specifically these problems, and we've relied heavily on their estimates for some of the numbers we use. DTE has other numbers that they use for their natural gas plants and what the fugitive emissions are. I think we strayed away from using those specifically, but you know, there's a lot baked into it. But yeah, but to John's point, they are included.
So a couple of other things that might be of interest.
Can I respond? So I think the question of the fugitive emissions comes down to, you know, a couple of things. It's and mainly where Ann Arbor places its chips. So you've mentioned this numerous times, John, that the energy savings reductions, the emissions reductions that we've had in Ann Arbor over the last 5-10 years come almost exclusively from DTE going from coal to natural gas. So, you know, most of what we've accomplished to date is because of them, not because of we putting insulation in our houses or making our building codes better or doing better cars, or none of that. You know, we throw up a few high visibility solar panels, and you know, we talk a lot, but this comes from DTE. Going forward, there's no reason to believe that our emissions won't be tied very closely to what DTE does going forward as well. So the question is, you know, given that reality, what can we do to impact DTE's emissions as a community? We can do resiliency things, all those kinds of things we're going to need to do anyway. But in terms of raw emissions reductions, is there something that Ann Arbor can do in partnership with DTE, or are we really doing it all alone? So, for example, one thing we could do is begin to question why DTE, or what would it take for DTE to provide us with clean gas? And I've supplied you and many others here with examples of other places that are using blockchain analyses and stuff. DTE has a biofuels, green fuels program. There's things that could be done to green up DTE's natural gas system and reduce their fugitive emissions. They don't have an incentive to do that. It's not going to come from the Michigan Public Service Commission. The city of Ann Arbor could turn to DTE and say, we want clean gas. We want this to happen. What do we have to do? And to begin that process. And I think tracking and accounting for the emissions is the first step. So we know what we're talking about. And I just say, I put it on the table that if we're going to be talking about spending our tax dollars to buy cars and electric vehicles and do all this other stuff, if this is an emissions problem, what can we do to make DTE provide us with lower emissions gas and electricity that is generated from lower emissions gas, especially when they can buy it, they can use blockchain. There's a bunch of different things that they could be doing. And I don't sense that we are engaging with DTE on that subject. That was one of the reasons why I wanted us to have a presentation on the rate case that's going on at the Michigan Public Service Commission. I haven't heard from Jeff. I haven't heard from the mayor. I haven't heard from anybody else that we are engaging with DTE Energy on the subject of we want our electricity to be generated with clean gas. They could buy a block of it and plug it into their thing and charge and basically dedicate it to us. They could do this. And we are in a position to put some pressure on the city to say, do that. Go talk to DTE and find out how we get cleaner gas and start the discussion. That's my point. Without data, without us having it. So if we're using an estimate and Josh is saying that we don't like DTE's numbers, okay, well, then let's put our own numbers out there and stand behind them. And if DTE argues with them, then let them give us better numbers. But I would think we should engage on this and be clear about it when we're moving forward. And it comes down to dollar for dollar, spending money in a lawsuit, suing DTE to make them give us green gas or buying, green cars. That should be part of the analysis. That's my point.
Councilmember Hare.
When I get the data, that's my point. We should be using fact-based decision making.
Well, I agree with that. And I'm going to just point out and share another link with everybody that we do have another resolution here, CEA 11. It's on the consent agenda that reauthorizes the city administrator to direct purchase natural gas and choice electric for all relevant city facilities.
Right.
And it only talks about giving them the flexibility to do that. It speaks to purchasing power and savings and contracts more than it does the nature of the gas or the electricity.
Absolutely.
But it says this is coming out of OSI, so I'm not sure if that means I should assume this has had the review for the things you just spoke to.
It has not. It has not.
I can actually speak a little bit to this because I handle some of the natural gas purchasing side on Constellation. So we do have choice natural gas, and Constellation does actually offer green, alternative green gas offerings, which we have actually looked into as an alternative. One of the problems we often face. So I can give you a very simple local example of green gas. So our landfill, it's basically off-gassing methane. We've put a landfill gas generator on it. We're able to capture that methane and actually turn it into something that then you can use turn into electricity, basically. One of the issues that we've found with the offerings that Constellation has, they just don't have enough for us to actually offset all of our natural gas with green natural gas. So, what they're supplying doesn't meet the demands that we have. I will turn over really quickly to say, even though we might not be looking at green natural gas, there is a lot of things that we're doing right now to look at renewables and alternatives for natural gas, period, right? So electrification, for example, making sure that we don't have natural gas to begin with, because there's always going to be some sort of leakage. And then trying to figure out with DTE, so the landfill solar project, trying to figure out the landfill solar project, negotiating that currently, and then seeing, and there are things that, aren't ready to really be talked about, but there are definitely conversations going on multiple levels that kind of address some of those conversations, some of those things you raised, Mark.
Commissioner McCoy?
Yeah, I just also wanted to amplify what Mark said, but also push back a little bit in that, like, I think part of putting pressure on DTE is going to come from stopping talking like our relationship with DTE is inevitable. So like we know that A20 is talking about community choice aggregation. We've had 2 months of public comments where people have mentioned municipal utility, and I think you're right that we need to hear more about the ratepayer case. We need to put more pressure on getting DTE to push for renewable energy. But I think some of that pressure is going to stop talking about, like I said, that going to stop talking about as if we have to have DTE. And the more and more we look into these alternative options that could be, not only more renewable energy, but also more affordable to Ann Arbor residents, the more that pressure is going to come as well.
I should also mention really quickly, Marcus, I saw the email that came by. As far as the rate case goes, we're currently in litigation, so we can't really talk about it publicly. But I have talked to Missy as to, what we could share and what we couldn't share, and at what point could we do maybe a presentation. So that's definitely something that we've looked at as well.
Okay, just to finish things up, primarily for Councilmember Hayner, it still may take a while to get to council, but a rough draft is nearly complete of a changes to the UDC for heritage and landmark trees. So that's in the natural features working group of the Environmental Commission. And then finally, of general interest maybe to commissioners, the solid waste resource management plan was approved by City Council, and the top priority for the solid waste working group of the Environmental Commission is to work on construction and demolition solid waste. So something we've talked about in the Environmental Commission, but probably not here, is that all of the greenhouse gas emissions that we estimate for the city are based on the tonnages that we measure. Both compost, they go to landfill and what the composition of that is. We do not measure construction and demolition waste. So all the waste that goes from construction sites are not included. And we know it's really significant, and 100% of it goes to landfill. So that will be one of the things that we will be working on. First of all, trying to get an estimate of how much that is, and then talking with stakeholders about what it would mean to try to divert some of that and how we could put that potentially in an ordinance. So that's it from the Environmental Commission. So I think the next point on the agenda is public comment again, correct? I don't have it right in front of me, I can pull it up. And then we'll take agenda items for the next meeting after that. So for public comment, I think we all know the spiel. This is an opportunity for people to speak up to 3 minutes. Please call 206-332-9723 or 213-338-8477. Enter the meeting ID. Just a second, I have to get that. Sorry. Meeting ID is 968-25-97-3797, and then press *9 to raise your hand, and you will be recognized by the last 3 digits of your number. So please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Josh, do we have anyone? You're muted.
Thanks, John. Oh, yep, I see 2 people raise their hands. So, oh, yep, and there's another person. 327. You are now, should be able to speak. Are you there? 327. Okay. 327, we can come back around and see if Might have some technical difficulties here.
They
Zero.
look like they're muted.
Oh,
on
okay.
Screen, the black shows them
There, yeah.
muted.
Can you
Okay.
unmute them, Josh, or?
Yes, give me. So I can ask them to unmute, but I think they actually have to do something on their end to officially unmute. Let me see if there's something else. Yep. Yeah, they're not unmuting. I'm not exactly sure what whether it's *9 or something else they have to touch. Does it say, John, how they unmute?
No, I don't know how to do
Hello?
that. Yes,
Oh,
there we
there you
go.
go.
I did
There we
it.
go.
Hi. This is Tegwin John. I also am here on a non-phone number. I live right now at 1218 Wines Drive. And I would like to make a comment and echo some of the things that some of the commission members have said already, which is that I don't see a lot of point in attempting to negotiate with DTE for a better mix of renewables or lower rates unless we are actually willing to do something else. DTE thinks that they can charge whatever they want of us, that they can limit the ability for our citizens to generate their own power and contribute that to their communities. And I don't think that that's a value that a lot of people in Ann Arbor share and agree with. And I think that Ann Arbor has a lot of resources, and being willing to stand up to DTE to operate our city based on energy sovereignty, and to demonstrate to the entire state of Michigan and the region that these giant for-profit energy companies are not the only option. They're not the end-all be-all. Would be a move that would benefit not only us, but also the entire region's energy sovereignty. And it would certainly make negotiating with DTE a lot easier, because right now they hold all the cards. And unless we're really willing to demonstrate that we will do something other than ask nicely over and over and over again, they have no reason to give us what we want. Thank you, Energy Commission members, for this very interesting conversation. And I will now end my comment.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say thank you for those comments, and I think they're right on. I'm lucky enough to have a summer home in Harbor Springs. Harbor Springs is part of a four-community group now: Harbor Springs, Petoskey, Charlevoix, and Traverse City, that are all municipal utilities. There's 42 municipal utilities in Michigan, Lansing Board of Water and Light, et cetera, even Chelsea Electric. Ann Arbor is not a municipal utility. If we were, we could do this ourselves. And there are municipal utilities, Holland Electric and others, that are well along the way to getting 100% renewables, and also in a position to generate renewable energy, some of which are on people's houses and some of it's centralized, and sell that as green power to third parties. So DTE is not, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'd ask you to take a look at what happened in Boulder, because this process is expensive and it requires a long, dedicated legal fight. And I agree with you. I think Ann Arbor is the community that should do it, and we should do it now and declare this and sharpen our lawyers' pencils and get at it.
All right, we do have 013. If you could unmute, and I think it's I just found out *6 to unmute for anyone who's. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Ian Pearsall. I live at 2016 Pauline Boulevard. I'm also here on calling out on a computer. Mark, thank you for your feedback on Tegman's comments. I would also like to echo my support for looking to alternatives to bargaining with DTE. Just looking at what their priorities are, which are increasing profits for their shareholders, they're not going to be moving to what they see as non-economically viable renewable energy in the near future. Even the renewable energies that Ann Arbor already has, including our hydroelectric dams, and our distributed solar, community solar, they're actively taking steps to hinder those. They're buying like below market rates from us for hydro as well as distributed solar. And I agree it's not going to be easy. The Boulder example makes that painfully clear, but I'd like to say that, or I'd like to make the point that it's not going to happen if we're just going through the private market with DTE. So we at this point, we need to do it, and that means taking the tough road. Yeah, thank you for having this conversation. I'd like to make a point on the electric vehicle discussion that it'd save a lot of money, as well as like not having to worry about whether we're using fracked gas or solar generated energy to not be buying more cars for the police. Especially, I agree that we should be looking at union made or US made materials for our renewable resources. But with all respect to those unions, the cops historically have made it their pastime of abusing unions and keeping them down. So I think it's a little hypocritical to be thinking about purchasing union-made vehicles or a police force that oppresses them. Thank you so much for hosting this meeting, and I'll yield the rest of my time. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Josh, do we have anybody else?
We do. Let's see. I think 134, you just went. 010.
Hello.
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 Yep.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. This is Wayne Appleyard phoning in from out in the hinterlands. Couple of things. First of all, I think it's really important to realize that carbon removal is sort of the butt end of things, that it's always going to be more expensive to remove carbon that you put up there as opposed to carbon that you have not put up there. And so we really need to continue to work towards more renewables and getting away from burning things. The person that called early in the meeting, I think, had some misinformation about the capacity percentages for wind in Michigan, which I looked it up on the web, and it says the average is 36%. And I know most of the stuff that's going in now are on taller towers and as well over 40%. But the other thing to realize, and it comes into your discussion about supplying renewable energy for charging vehicles. And I would hope that all of you on the Energy Commission will read the paper that the EV subcommittee put together on why requiring that is not a good idea, because among other things, in the wintertime, we get less, between a third and a half of the amount of solar that we get in the summertime. I've looked at my solar array and that's what I get. So it would mean that you would have to have a very oversized array and batteries for probably a week or two to really do that. Otherwise, most of it in the wintertime, you're actually going to be getting from DTE anyways. And so you're adding a real expensive item, a bunch of batteries that aren't really going to work very well. So I'm a strong believer that the grid is your friend. It's the ultimate battery source, and you need to work on DTE to get the rates to work out better. I'm glad that somebody talked about how trees aren't really a very good answer. I have information about when you install a 1.5-inch caliper tree, which is what goes in new site plans, and it takes 10 years for it to really sequester much of anything. So planting 10,000 trees would be good for a lot of reasons, but sequestration isn't really one of them. I'm also a little bit disappointed that legal hasn't stepped up and reviewed the EV ordinance, which was largely complete several months ago, but hopefully they will come through for us. And I might suggest that I think it's very difficult to get away from DTE completely. We have, because of the Foot Act, they have a quote unquote franchise that lasts forever, but I think the Constitution allows us to collect franchise fees, and somebody should look into trying to negotiate getting a franchise fee from them, which would basically allow us to get funds for doing all the work that we really need to do to try and reduce our dependence on them. Might be an easier route to go. They have a, I think it's C10 or something like that is their tariff for collecting fees that are required by local municipalities. So that might be a better route to go. And I think that's it. So good listening to you all, and have a good night.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. Good hearing from you. And then finally, caller 134, if you could unmute.
Yes, thanks, Mr. McDonald. Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I'll be brief. My thanks to the caller, Mr. Appleyard, for correcting me on wind capacity factor. I also appreciate Commissioner Cleavy's remarks on being more active on the DTE rate case and on engaging with DTE to obtain clean electricity and green natural gas, at least for municipal operations to start. Thanks for that. At the same time, I agree with Commissioner McCoy and with the callers, Tegwin John and Ian Pearsall, on the benefits of simultaneously exploring municipalization. Commissioner Cleavy twice has raised the painful Boulder utility municipalization history. I have reviewed that history. Boulder is definitely not an experience we want to repeat. The city spent over $27 million in litigation with Xcel, the private electric utility there, with not a lot to show for it at the end. However, Boulder and Ann Arbor are different. In the Boulder litigation, the central question was whether the Boulder City Charter authorized a municipal electric utility. That question was never resolved, with some courts saying yes and others saying no. The Boulder City Council basically caved in after 8 years of litigation and dissolved its municipal utility in exchange for a better franchise agreement with Xcel and higher levels of renewable energy, by the way, renewable electricity. However, unlike Boulder City Charter, Ann Arbor's charter expressly authorizes a municipal utility. No doubt DTE would find other grounds to sue to protect its local electric franchise, but they would probably rest on shakier legal ground. My point is the situations are fundamentally different, with Ann Arbor benefiting from a city charter much more favorable to municipalization. We might want to get an expert legal opinion on this. Thanks.
Say thank you, Ken. I agree with you, and I'm glad you read it, and that's why I encourage people to look at this. $26 million is that's about the kind of money we're going to have to come up with. Yes, I think we do. We used to be a municipal utility. We gave up the right to do that. We turned it over to DTE. We can get it back. It isn't going to be cheap, but it's going to take a clear view, and people need to look at the Boulder experience to see a couple things. One being why, after spending $26 million, they quit. So if we're going to go down this avenue, and I think we should, then we have to be dedicated and committed to doing this and not be bought off at the end with some, green watts thrown our way to assuage whatever hurt feelings we have. There's only one way to win this thing, and that's we do it and we become a municipal utility. So thank you for reading it, and thank you for your comments. I couldn't agree more.
So I'd like to offer an alternative to that path. Right now, energy is limited to 90% of the energy is monopoly energy. We have 10% freedom of choice. This is something that's legislated. It's legislated in Lansing. It's been a possibility, if we can get the money out of our politics, that we could go from 10% energy choice to more than 10% and even 100% energy choice. Other states have done this. We wouldn't be the first state to do it. Illinois has already done it. I believe Ohio has already done it. And I don't see any arguments against having a free market to energy access, where you can make the decision whether you want to have green energy or whatever DTE offers. So it could be done, but it's hard to do because they are able to influence our legal process and corrupt our legal process because of money. So you got to start there. And it would be certainly a lot less expensive if there was just, we forced DTE to compete. And then maybe they would wise up and do more green energy, because it would be in their best interest, because if they don't, they're going to be on the losing end of that competition. When you take competition out of the mix, what you end up with is a lack of innovation, a lack of cost control, and certainly, you know, the ability to just say, I don't care about what the customers think, because they don't answer to anybody. That's the problem. So I think there are other paths, but in order to take those other paths, we need to have a different legislative action in Lansing that is uncorrupted by the money that DTE uses.
So Larry, I just I appreciate the idea of uncorrupting, taking money out of politics. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. I was involved in the early electric choice movement when John Engler was governor, and the company I work with, Small Business Association of Michigan, we were very active in being pro-choice and wanting to have those caps there. It has been capped at 10% for quite some time now. Both the Democrats and the Republicans seem to not want that kind of competition. But one downside of electric choice, which I thought was an unforeseen consequence, was when you allowed any more choice to come into the state, we didn't get green choice coming into the state. We got a lot of brown power purchased on the spot market that washed into the state, and we had utilities that were unable to do green stuff because of choice was really in their way. They were competing against the worst of the brown power and spot market prices, and so it's I think competition is great. I think the competition between DTE and the 41 municipal utilities in the state, if we get that's the kind of competition I think makes a lot more sense, because we don't need more brown unregulated power. There were watts coming into Michigan from outside they were calling it biofuel. Basically, it was coal sprayed with vegetable oil and burned and called biofuel. And that's one of the negatives of choice. So
well, I think if you look at municipalities all across the state, they all charge less than DTE and consumers. Their rates are definitely lower. If you look at the energy choice, that 10%, a lot of it's our school system. And if you look at the rates that they pay, it is considerably less than what you pay if you're a DTE customer or consumers. So energy choice may not always give you the green energy choices, although what you were talking about was then and not now. Now we're talking about renewables being the cheapest alternative. And you just brought up the topic that what's going on with DTE is wanting to build yet another natural gas plant.
Yeah.
They're doing exactly the opposite of what they should be doing. So I think, I've heard a very wise person say, if you want to bring them to the table, if you want to change the way they behave, you have to start giving them a little bit of pain. And the idea of taking 10% to 20% to 30% to 40% is not, in my mind, it has no negative consequences for ratepayers and could have significant benefits to giving them a little bit of pain and making them act like a better environmental citizen.
Right.
So,
Green choice, raising the cap to 25% for green choice would do exactly that. Yeah, I agree with you totally.
I mean, I think it's got a better shot, to be honest, than trying to become a municipal energy company here. It's my opinion. I don't know for sure.
To try to wrap this up and sort of also move to the next agenda items for the next meeting. What I propose, Josh, is that you talk to Missy about when we can have or potentially dedicate an entire meeting to this topic, because this keeps on coming up time and time again. I recognize that the city is having sensitive discussions with DTE. I recognize that it is highly political. I recognize, all the pitfalls associated with this. But we know that this is a topic with residents. We've heard several of them talk about it today, and we shouldn't tiptoe around it too much longer. It really deserves to be something that we address head on, address with our eyes wide open. So if you would make a note of that. I would like to address one other item that was brought up by Wayne Appleyard to Councilmember Hayner. Councilmember Hayner, you heard Mr. Appleyard indicate that we have a delay with not only one, but we've seen now many times with ordinances going through the attorney's office and being delayed. I would state from my experience professionally, having also done a lot of work in the area of performance management and lean enterprise and other kinds of things, that best-in-class entities look not only at the quality of the work and the cost or the cost implications of the work that they do, but also the lead time in getting that work done. And in something like A20 plan, and where we're trying to bring emissions down, and as Wayne has reminded us on other occasions, it's the area under the curve, the emissions versus time curve, that's important. We need to do things quickly. And we can't accept, in my view, the situation that we've had for all the time that I've been involved with the Energy Environmental Commission, where things take forever getting through the attorney's office. And I know that Missy has had now support of additional counsel in the energy area, but in general, I think council members have to look at what is the city losing where things are sitting in queue or in process in the attorney's office. And in my view, it's significant that we're losing a lot. And that means potentially more resources, or it means making choices that we potentially haven't made in the past, but we are waiting. And waiting in a case where you have a climate emergency is really detrimental to our interests. And I'm sure it is in other regards as well. So you don't need, you can comment on it. I just want you to.
I'm happy to comment on it because I couldn't agree more, because, the Ken Garber helped me write and so did you folks, write an excellent electrification ordinance, and it got lost forever, months and months. And finally I said, what has happened to it? Well, I was told that it got punted back to OSI. It was on Missy's desk. So I had to call Missy and say, what's going on with my electrification ordinance? Like, are we going to do it? We're going to do it and fight it in the courts? Are we going to sit on it and hope the state acts, which it's not going to, And the same with pollute or pay, right? And so when are we going to lead on this? And I absolutely agree that things are getting lost in legal. I know we have a new attorney who I haven't really had any problems with any of our attorneys outside of the great delays that these things take. But, we have a new person who I actually know outside of, I didn't know they were being hired. And he contacted me about some more social-based resolutions that I'm working on. He's going to be working on me with them. And so perhaps it's just a matter of trying to continue to cultivate these relationships with our legal staff and say, look, these things have to be prioritized. And I can't, our legal staff and Mr. Postma particularly acts as the client for the whole of the body. And so I have not made the, I'm not taking the steps that I'm sure some other council people do to get his ear. because I like to speak as from the whole of the body is what we were told, but clearly that's not how things get done. I've learned that my first 2 years here. And so the next 2 years, I'm going to do what I have to do to try and get things done in a more timely manner, because it is an emergency and you can't claim it is and say it is and ask people to get on board and then have, but one part of the city dragging it all down. So thanks for saying that. And I agree. I'll see what I can do to move these things in the future. And does anyone know what happened to that electrification for new construction ordinance that we had floating? Has anybody heard from it? It's like it fell into the ocean.
And I'll be honest with you, council member Ainer. I also, we have a solar RFP. We have many things that have been, just like you said, lost in the ocean. So.
Are you assigned a staff attorney for these projects internally?
We are assigned one, yes, but it takes a long time. They look at things and then it just takes a long time. It's a very long process. I will, to John's point, we do have, thankfully, now special legal counsel that has a specific eye towards energy, it's a huge improvement in many ways. But obviously there are still processes we have to go through, and that has been depending, and I want to respect the attorneys and their process, but it can be frustrating for sure.
Yeah, I asked at the last meeting, there was a talk about releasing various privilege memos, and some of you may have heard that conversation, and I'm all for it, because I think unless it jeopardizes the city, let's let people see what they're working on. And along with that was a question that I had: can I go search through other previous memos to find out what the legal positions were? Could I have done my own legal research, say, on the electrification or any other accommodations or restrictions we tried to put on building, and as an example, on the building trades over the years? And it didn't really sound like they keep a master list of these memos. In fact, they basically said they didn't. And so one of the things I'm going to work on my next 2 years is looking at creating a unified way to view our city's assets. And that assets would include the legal advice that we receive as a council, and organizing that better, and organizing some of the things around our GIS assets, and organizing some other things around internal assets. And Derek was really on board with it. He's setting up a meeting. It would really help him a lot, especially in building and planning and constituent services. And so anything energy would like to see as part of that, please let me know. Because I just try to pick a project that I can actually work on for the next 2 years outside of the regular policy things, because I'm going to have it's clear from these assignments that some of us are going to have greatly reduced policy authority. So
just one last comment on this. Every professional that I've worked with in my whole life, including legal at my former employer Bosch, had to give due dates. If you're a professional, you give a due date. Or at least you give a date by when you would give a date. So, I can't tell you now, but in a week I will give you a due date. And then you deliver according to that due date. And if you have to put in more time, you still meet that due date. You just don't simply say, I'll deliver it whenever I think I can deliver it. It's just, I've never heard of a situation where you get away without giving a due date. And you also have transparency in terms of your lead time on things, and when what is my inflow of work, what's my outflow of work, and I just don't see that level of accountability and transparency in the attorney's office, and it's going to kill all the things we need to do in A20, because we can't just afford to wait for everything, and we will have a lot of things that we have to do, whether it's contracts reviewed or whether it's new ordinances or whatever. We need to have, there has to be a change in paradigm in the way things are done in terms of getting legal input. So
John, I'd just like to throw 2 cents in, is that this is the legal staff we would need, or we would be using, if we decided to go become a municipal utility. So that's part of the question about, are we really ready for anything like that, given the legal team we have now, and so just threw that out there.
Commissioner McCoy?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo your first comment too, because I actually thought we were going to have more of that conversation around DTE and like how things have been strategized and planned a little bit more at this meeting based on the conversation from last meeting. So I just wanted to echo, like, Josh, seeing when we can have that conversation, because it seems like we've been putting it off for a while. And I also got a message that there was a public comment, someone who wanted to give public comment in the waiting room, which maybe they got it. And I don't know if we are finished with that portion, but if that's an option, I think there's someone else.
If there is someone, we should recognize the person.
If someone else, if you want to raise your hand, we can call on you.
*9.
Yep, *9. Oh, there we are. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. I want to thank you again for letting me make a public comment here. I'm a student at U of M. My name is Zachariah. I'm in my 3rd year. I'm an undergrad student, and I just got finished taking a chemistry exam, actually, which is why I couldn't be here earlier. I just finished it up. But I heard that municipalization was something that was going to be discussed here tonight, and I just want to express my support for this idea. I have a really strong interest in it for a couple reasons. First of all, as part of my my education at U of M, I actually did a study abroad year in the city of Freiburg, Germany, where they have a municipal utility. And they produce a lot of energy, and there's actually a few different cities around that have their own utilities that are able to produce so much energy. They produce more energy that they can actually consume, so that they end up selling it to neighboring areas, neighboring countries, and actually neighboring states and cities. And they end up making a good amount of money for the residents. And it seems like a really great deal for everybody there who's invested in that system. I also had the opportunity to study one time in Quebec as well, and they have their own provincial utility, Hydro-Quebec. And once again, that was now that they have control over how they produce their energy, the province can choose how they hire people, what kind of energy they produce, and they can actually sell it to other places. And I think that's just seems like a really great idea, a really great deal for the residents there. And they end up producing more energy than they need as well here over there in Quebec, and they end up selling it to the United States and make a good amount of money from that. So it seems like a really smart way to have consistent income for a government. It's like another, and also to have control over how the energy is produced. And another thing I'll say is the last thing here. As a young person, I'm very, very, very concerned about the future in terms of climate change. It's one thing that I feel really powerless about. And I look online to see what kind of how is my energy being produced? And I'm a consumer of DTE Energy. They say that they produce, or 60% of the energy that they produce is from coal. That's just not acceptable today. In 2020, that's not acceptable. And it seems like it's putting my future at risk, a great risk. And I think that having a municipal utility is a great way to be able to control how we produce our energy here in Ann Arbor. But that's all. Thank you very much for letting me make public comment here.
Thanks, Zachariah.
Thanks, Zachariah. I'd just like to say one thing, that the other 40% comes for DTE comes from methane and frack gas, and the methane, fugitive methane that leaks from it causes more environmental damage than coal. So we'd be better off going back to DTE and asking them to do more coal and less frack gas. That's the position that they got us in now. So you bet. I think the options are moving forward on municipals. Great idea. We'd love to. Why don't you come spend some more time with us, and maybe we can get you on a committee or something to talk about this and do this. There's a solarization subcommittee. John Mirsky actually entered into the Energy Commission and got on by volunteering for a subcommittee and worked on that and got himself into the commission that way. And now he's chair. So there's a pathway. We'd love to have you in. So please bring your studies and you can be part of the discussion about this. It'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And I agree. And Josh, if we do have this as a subject, I would like some consultation with Chuck in advance. Chuck has unique insights and expertise, and we should hear his voice as a part of the topic. So
I've been pretty quiet about this whole topic. I could go in a lot of directions and speak for a couple days probably on this, but let's talk about that in a minute when we talk about the next meeting, John.
Let's do that right now. So the first thing that we have as a topic, and these maybe, Josh, you can talk to Missy and give some feedback to us as to which topics we entertain on which dates, but certainly this is one. The whole topic of municipal utility, community choice aggregation, all these interrelated topics with how is our energy generated, and what influence do we have just on our own, but also in coordination with other entities around the state, like other municipalities, and with our state representatives, etc. Another one that we talked about was this global CO2 initiative in carbon sequestration and biosequestration. I think that's one set of interrelated topics. And those are the two that I had noted, but I think I missed a couple. Any others from Josh that you had noted, or from others commissioners?
Yeah, so Missy's going to do a presentation most likely in December as well, talking a little bit about the relationship with OSI and the Energy Commission, how they work together.
Yeah.
I will say on the municipalization and CCAs, the office has obviously been looking at this for a very long time. And Missy, I think in large part, doesn't feel prepared for us to really be engaged in those conversations. But I think in talking to you, Chuck, I think there's even some 101 kind of things that we can all learn from as far as the grid, how it works, and then maybe get a little bit more into some of these things that I think would be super helpful, even if it is next meeting. So I know we've done a lot of research on CCAs and it's in our plan, and have looked at a whole bunch of different ways to implement CCAs throughout different states and everything. So we're definitely looking at these things for sure.
Any other topics from other commissioners? Councilmember Hayter, that you included if there's something from your side. Yep. Okay. I think that's it. So I thank everybody, commissioners, Councilmember Hayter, thanks again for your service on the commission. Thanks to members of the public that listened in and that commented. It is 8:10 p.m. and I call this meeting to a close. Thanks everybody. And
One
have a
last
good
thing,
rest
John?
of your evening.